بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. كان الناس أمة واحدة فبعث الله النبيين مبشرين ومنذرين وأنزل معهم الكتاب بالحق ليحكم بين الناس فيما اختلفوا فيه وما اختلف فيه إلا الذين أوتوه من بعد ما جاءتهم البينات بغيا بينهم فهدى الله الذين آمنوا لما اختلفوا فيه من الحق بإذنه والله يهدي من يشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. Respectful honorable friends, in this verse that I've recited, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes mention with regards to the previous ummah and how people turned away from the straight path. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that كَانَ النَّاسُ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا, that mankind was ummatan wahida, one ummat, one group. فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ النَّبِيِّينَ مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ, thus Allah sent the prophets mubashirin, to give glad tidings, وَمُنذِرِينَ, and to warn. وَأَنزَلَ مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ بِالْحَقِّ, and He sent with them, revealed to them the book, بِالْحَقِّ, the truth, لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ, in order to judge between the people, فِيمَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِي, in those matters in which they disputed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that كَانَ النَّاسُ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا. Kana was a nas, mankind, that mankind was ummatan wahida, one ummat. That mankind was ummatan wahida, one ummat. The word ummatan, which we normally translate as group, refers to those people who are united in something. A group of people that are united on one thing is called an ummat. Whether they are united on beliefs, religion, ideology, ism, or anything else, a group of people who share the same beliefs or same thoughts is known as ummat. Ummatan wahida, one ummat. So the people were, and kana is utilized with a nominal sentence which refers to the past tense. That the people were ummatan wahida, one ummat, one group. Ummatan wahida, in what aspect? Ummatan wahida here refers to one religion, one belief, and one faith. Kana an-nasu ummatan wahida refers to the time of Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam, then obviously it was only he and Hawa. Both of them were believers. And then the children of Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam also followed the religion, the teachings of Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam. So they were all ummatan wahida, one group. فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ النَّبِيِّينَ مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ. Allah then says that He sent the prophets to warn, to give glad tidings, and to warn. And then Allah mentions of why He revealed the kitab. This shows us that this ummah at one time was one. So there was a time when each and every single person on the earth were believers of one religion, of one faith. But then later, obviously, this changed. What shows us that it changed? The fact that فَأَبَثَ اللَّهُ النَّبِيِّينَ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to send the prophets. If mankind had remained on one deen, there wouldn't have been the need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send any of His prophets. Now when and up till when were mankind ummatan wahida one? Mufassirin mentioned that from the time of Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam to the time of Sayyidina Idris alayhi salam, all the people were ummatan wahida, they only believed in one Allah. Besides the odd few individuals, as in Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam's son Qabil, who after killing his brother Habil, besides him and few individuals, the rest were all ummatun wahida, believers of this one faith of Islam, the teachings of Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam. The hadith mentions that this period of time was 10 qurn. One qurn approximately is equal to 100 years. So the time between Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam to Idris alayhi salam was 10 qurn, which means 1,000 years. So some of us mentioned that this Kana Nas Ummatan Wahida refers to the period of time of 1,000 years between the time of Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam and Sayyidina Idris alayhi salam. There are those who say that Kana Nas Ummatan Wahida refers to the period of time after the flood of Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, wherein after the flood every person was destroyed besides those believers who were with Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam. So whichever period it is, it shows us that it is the early period anyway, because Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam's period does come between Adam and Idris alayhi salam anyway. So this was a period of time wherein it was Kana Nasu Ummatan Wahida, mankind were just one ummat, one nation, one believers in one religion. فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ النَّبِيِّينَ مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ. Thus Allah then sent the prophets Mubashirin to give glad tidings, وَمُنذِرِينَ, and to warn, which is the duty of the prophets, because as time went on, people turned away from the faith, people turned away from the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the teachings of the prophets, due to which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to send down the prophets, Mubashirin, to give glad tidings. Glad tidings to those people who carried on steadfastly on the teachings of the time, وَمُنذِرِينَ, and as a warner for those people who turned away from the teachings of the time. So a Nabi had two tasks, Mubashirin wa Munzirin. Either they came as a glad tidings or as a warner. Glad tidings, obviously, for any person who remains upon deen and dies in a condition of him being practicing deen, for him there's nothing but glad tidings. The Quran also from start to end, over and over, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives glad tidings for the believers with regards the deeds, with regards the blessings of doing good deeds, and also with regards the position in the hereafter. وَمُنذِرِينَ, as warners, over and over in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us with regards evil actions. If we die without iman, or we die having committed sins, what a person's position will be in the hereafter. وَأَنزَلَ مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ بِالْحَقِّ لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ فِي مَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ. And وَأَنزَلَ, we sent مَعَهُمْ, with them, al-kitab, the book, بِالْحَقِّ, that comprised of the truth. Why? لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ فِي مَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ, in order to judge between the people in those matters in which they disputed. Which means that after a period of time, people started to dispute the teachings of the Anbiya. People turned away from the religion of Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam, by which then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to send down the kitab bil haqqi, with the truth, in order to judge between those people فِيمَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ, who disputed in it. So people started disputing in the teachings of the prophets, and we find that before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this, on top He just mentions فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ النَّبِيِّينَ. he first mentions that the ummah were one ummah, thus we sent the prophets. Now one may ask that if the ummah was one, then why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala need to send the other prophets? The reason is because in between the verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't brought the words, and then the people disputed, hence He sent the prophets. He hasn't brought the whole detail. The reason behind this, as some people read this verse as كَانَ النَّاسُ أُمَّةٌ وَاحِدَةٌ فَمَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ فَاخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ النَّبِيِّينَ. But the words فَاخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ, the people disputed in it, hence Allah sent the prophets, hasn't been mentioned. The reason for this is because, as we know, the Quran is not a storybook. The Quran doesn't mention everything in detail. Just the fact that the later verse shows us that the Quran was revealed to judge between those who disputed, shows us that obviously after they were one ummah they disputed, by which then there was a need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send the prophets. The siyaq or sabaq, that which comes before and after it, explains it itself. And this is one of the uslubs, one of the methods of Allah in the Quran, wherein everything isn't mentioned word to word in detail. As we know ourselves in Surah Yusuf, where Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam interpreted a dream for one of the prisoners, and he told the prisoner that when you go to the king, remember me in front of him. Now when the king had seen a dream, this prisoner said to the king that allow me to go and see Yusuf, and I will give you the interpretation. And immediately after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions of the prisoner conversing with Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. He doesn't bring in between the what answer, what did the king say to it, did the king give him permission or not, and the king then gave him permission, and this person then how he got to the prison, how he got inside and met him. None of these things, there's no need for this detail at all. And just the fact that then Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam gave him the interpretation shows us obviously the king allowed him to go, so he went and he met Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. So there is no need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring everything in such detail. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where there's just a need to indicate towards something, He just indicates towards it. So the fact that He mentions that He had to send down the prophets shows us that the people then started disputing amongst themselves, due to which He had to send the prophets. What did He do? وَأَنزَلَ مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابِ. He sent the prophets, وَأَنزَلَ مَعَهُمْ, and He revealed upon them the book. Which shows us that with the book Allah sent a prophet, with the prophet Allah sent the book. Both were important, because obviously there's no point sending a person but he doesn't know what he has to do. So a person deputizes, he appoints somebody to be a spokesman for him and tells him, look, you have to go to this country, and that's all he tells him. Your job is to go to this country and meet the king of that country or meet whoever there. And a person then goes there, he gets there, and then he wonders, well, what am I supposed to do here? He meets the king, he meets whoever he has to, but he doesn't know what he has to do there. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the prophets, but ma'ahumul kitab, with them a book, a guidebook, a manual, on which they base their teachings upon, and then they teach the people what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants them to do and what's in the book. And as we know ourselves, a person does something which is theory, and then a person needs to do the practical. Just the theory itself is not sufficient. A person now wants to learn how to swim, so he takes a book in which he learns how to swim. He shows him all the movements and what he has to do and all the techniques in the book. And then he decides, okay, let me now go and try it out. So he goes into the pool with his book, and he tries to swim as it shows him in the book. What happens? He drowns and his book also sinks with him. In the same way, a person wants to learn martial arts or karate, for example. He now just looks up a manual, looks in the books. He thinks that he's free from instructor. He doesn't need to join a club, or he doesn't need an instructor. He thinks just reading in a book will be sufficient. He sees all the Bruce Lee pictures there, all the illustrations there, and he thinks, okay, I'll also do the same kind of movements. Now what happens when he's faced in combat with somebody? He doesn't have a clue what he has to do. Why? Because he needs to have the instructor there who's going to show him exactly that this is how the book shows you and this is how it looks in real life. This is what you'll do, this is when you will do it, and this is how you'll do it, this is when you won't do it, this is when you need to do it, etc. And if a person now just grabs hold of any person, so he grabs hold of me that now come show me the movements, then he won't get far at all, because I would be there without the manual. So in the same way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala فَبَعْثَ اللَّهُ النَّبِيِّينَ, He sends the prophets, وَأَنزَلَ مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابِ, and He reveals upon them the book. So that the book and the man then teaches the people and shows the people the right path. The book alone is not sufficient, so the people were in need of a person to teach them. And it had to obviously be a person similar to them. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent an angel, as the people did oppose, that why is a prophet a human like us? He should be an angel instead, because they are teaching the words of Allah. Then obviously this wouldn't be correct either. So if we were to hire the services of Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, they come down and teach us how to do karate, nobody will turn up at all, isn't it? And people will say to Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, you're so huge that your whole body encompasses the whole world, nobody's going to come and combat with you, so what's the point us learning from you? This wouldn't work at all. So it has to be somebody who is just similar to us. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a human being who also eats and sleeps and has the needs of any other human being as a prophet, and ma'ahumul kitab, with the kitab. It also indicates and shows us that the prophets came down with only one thing, and that is to teach the people what is in the kitab which is revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which shows us that the teachings of the prophets are nothing but the teaching of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if a prophet mentions something which isn't in the Quran or in the book at the time, it doesn't now mean that he is mentioning something from his own side. These are his own teachings, but in reality they are the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala itself. وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْحَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيُ يُوحَىٰ. With regards to Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah ta'ala himself mentions that when he speaks, he doesn't just speak from his own side, from his own desires, that he wants to just tell people do this, do that, live this way or live that way. In huwa illa wahyu yuha. It itself, what he mentions, is wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but different form of wahi. It isn't the part of the wahi that forms being the verses of the Quran, but it is just as the wahi of the Quran. Hence, it is very, very important that along with the books, a person has to have an ustad. It is not sufficient that a person, he just opens the commentary or the tafseer of the Quran, and he starts reading the tafseer of the Quran, the commentary of the Quran, without it getting properly interpreted by an ustad, somebody who is going to teach what the Quran is. And at the same time, you won't just want somebody who hasn't got a clue at all what the Quran says, what the Hadith says, and that person just sits on the minbar and he starts talking, because he'll talk anything but what's in the Quran and in the Hadith. And if a person cannot think himself that he is independent from having an ustad, somebody who is going to teach him ilm and deen. So he shows us that with the teachings, with the book, a person has to have an ustad, somebody who is going to teach him what's in the book. Otherwise you'll find that the book on its own can either be, which is a means of guidance, but it can actually become a means of a person being misled if he utilizes the book without the ustad. Similarly, if a person just learns all the techniques, but he doesn't learn when and how to learn it, when to use it, which obviously only the instructor, the teacher, the ustad will teach, then what happens at the wrong time, he'll utilize the wrong thing, he'll do the wrong thing at the wrong time, and instead of protecting himself, he'll end up killing somebody, by which then he's into more problems, more trouble than what he was before. So therefore, a person who may already be in darkness, but now when he starts reading the kitab, reading the book, looking for guidance and looking for the light, he finds himself steeping more and more into darkness. And you have a lot of cases such wherein people just start reading books, and especially when there are books which are higher than a person's understanding. And once they start reading these type of books, they don't understand and they start making interpretations of their own. Because when they can't understand what he's trying to say, or if something is ambiguous, then what happens is they just start thinking themselves, and when they start thinking themselves, they are going to utilize the deficient mind that they have. Whereas an alim ad-din, an ustad, when he starts thinking and pondering, he doesn't just utilize his own mind, but he utilizes the principles of Quran and Hadith. According to the other interpretations of the Quran, of Hadith, and the knowledge that a person has, ilm ad-din, utilizing those tools, a person, he utilizes his thoughts upon it. So when the fuqaha, the jurists, the mufassirin give any opinions, they're not just giving any opinions from their own side, that they just thought of something and now they started teaching the people, but they have come to the conclusion utilizing the tools that they have gained from the Quran itself. Now, for example, a person, a mechanic, he's stuck, he doesn't know what to do at one junction. Now he knows the best thing is maybe if I open up a bit further or do some other work around it, I might find out what the problem is. So what he's going to do, he's not going to go and take out the tools of a decorator. He's going to take his tool, the tools of a mechanic, and utilizing his tools, which he knows in the field of mechanism, he's going to utilize that, and from that he'll come to some form of conclusion, oh, it's probably this, that's the fault. In the same way, the scholars of deen also, they don't just come to an opinion from their own heads, from their own minds. They're utilizing all the principle, usul of fiqh, usul of tafseer. That's when they come to these opinions. So it shows, dear friends, that for a person to be in the position where they can give tafseer of the Quran, interpretation of the Quran, interpretation of the hadith, of fiqh, etc., somebody has to have a lot of knowledge and the principles of usul of fiqh, hadith, tafsir, etc. It isn't just the work of any person that he just opens the book and starts interpreting. So it is very, very important that with the book a person has an ustad. As we find many people today, they have been misled by just sitting on the internet and reading various websites. I think it's easy for them now that instead of them going to the library, instead of going to the ustad, they say, oh, the ustad is just in front of him at home. The ustad is there now at home. So he just goes online and he goes and he just searches any Google site, any site he finds, anything he's got in front of him, and he starts reading this. As you find nowadays, a lot of questions that you get from the internet are based upon something that they've read on another site. Where a person, he might have just heard something elsewhere, or he knows this is what people practices, and then he goes to another website and reads something there, which obviously confuses him. And then the questions that otherwise wouldn't have come, they now start coming wherein a person is confused. That this is what I've learned till now, but I've read this on this website, or this person has said this on this website, and that poor person now just gets confused. This type of questions you get a lot. And most of them are saying that up till now we were always thinking this way, but now I read on this website or that website, something like this. And at least these are those fortunate people who do have the decency to at least ask inquiry, due to which at least they'll find the right way. But there'll be those people who will just take it as they see it. Well, this is what the fatwa is by this lady on the internet. So then they just follow it and go by it. And due to which then they're totally misled. So it's very, very important that a person has an ustad. Which means that you read the books on your own also. Have somebody who you know that if there's anything you do not understand, you can go and ask, so this is what I've read in the book, I do not understand it, please explain it to me. Is it right? Is it wrong? These type of questions we should ask, and not just read it and then blindly follow it if we have any doubts in it. Also, it's very, very important that we read books of authentic authors as well. In today's time, it's become very, very easy for a person to become an author. You go to bookshops and you look at books, nice fancy cover books, nice titles. When it comes to the author, you don't have a clue who the author is. Whether the author has any authority itself, whether the author is learned enough or not, no idea at all. Some doctor or some sister or some brother just writes a book, and he doesn't possess, or she doesn't possess, any knowledge of what Islam is. And those are the types of books where you find people are giving their own opinions about Islam, by which people become misled. That's why it's very, very important to look at the title and also look at who the author is, whether the author has any authority at all on writing books on Islam. In today's time, it's become very easy. You write a book, just go on a few sites, do a bit of searching here and there, and just do a bit of copy and paste, It says copy and paste, and you've got your own manual there, your entire document, your whole book there. Publish it with your name, and it's a bestseller. And then that's when you get views also, concocting views also, because obviously you just cut and paste. You get a review from one person, then you get a review of another person, you get a review from some other person of another aqidah, someone of another beliefs, and then you're coming up with an absolute salad dish there. And these are the types of books, dear friends, that are selling in our bookshops. Person goes there, you wonder, you look at the books, you wonder who the author is, you wonder where this person is, does they have any knowledge? And if some books have the picture of the person, you just look at the picture, you want to put the book down. Because obviously, it reflects on what a person has inside, isn't it? The outside is going to reflect on what a person, how much he has inside him also. So the book will show you. And then if you do read through it, you'll know exactly how misled the person is. And those people who just buy it and start reading it, they are also becoming greatly misled in today's time. Hence it's very, very important. وَأَنزَلَ مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابِ Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down the Anbiya, and with it they sent the Kitab. Now that there is no Anbiya, the ulama are warathatul Anbiya. They are the inheritors, the heirs of the Anbiya, which means that in those period of times, like now till the day of Qiyamah, from the demise of Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, no Nabi is going to come to teach us the Quran. Hence those people who have been given the task of this is the ulama. Why? Because they are the direct heirs of the Anbiya. And what do they inherit from them? Not dirhams and dinars, no other legacy, but of ilm. So ulama warathatul Anbiya, they have inherited this from the Anbiya, from Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So if there is any person that you should go to for the correct interpretation, or to go to seek knowledge, should only be the people of knowledge. The moment a person is going to seek knowledge from people who are not learned, from people who are not people of knowledge, then a person is going to be misled. And this is one of the signs of Qiyamah, that people who are not worthy of position, people who are not worthy of ruling, these types of people will be given positions. And this is what we find today. People who are not worthy of lecturing, people who are not worthy of teaching people what knowledge is, these are the people who are sitting on the mimbar, these are the people who are chairing various Muslim organizations, these are the people who are lecturing people, by which we find they are misleading the people instead of guiding them. Because you'll find there's a big difference between what the print and the true knowledge, the understanding of knowledge. Lest we find Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam made dua for Sayyidina Anas Radhiyallahu Ta'ala, Allahumma fiqhu fi deen, that oh Allah, give him tafaqquh fi deen, the understanding of deen. That's why you find tafaqquh fi deen is something different. Tafaqquh fi deen means the insight of deen, the insight of knowledge. This is different, and just the print itself, the manuscript, this is something totally different. A person may read a few lines of something, and each person will understand it differently. You just have one paragraph, tell 10 people to read it, 10 people will come out with different interpretations. But the thing is, a person who has the tafaqquh of deen, when he reads it with the sight and the mind of deen itself. He doesn't read it through the sight of world or material. He doesn't read it with his own opinion, with regards to his own desires, as did the ulama of the previous ummahs of the Banu Israel, etc., where they started reading the verses of the Torah and started interpreting in order to suit their own whims and their own fancies. Because why? When they read it with the mind of their own desire, with their own thoughts. If they're going to teach the people, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that, then they'll think, well, it means that we have to also do it. So, well, I don't want to be doing this, so then they'll misinterpret it, they'll change things. So they are reading it with the mind, of their own desires. So you find tafaqquh fi deen, which is something very, very important. And a person should only seek knowledge of deen from the ulama, and especially those ulama who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted tafaqquh fi deen. Because when they look at the Quran, when they look at deen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them a special insight of what is meant from the verses, what is meant from various injunctions, and how it should be implemented. Otherwise you find people just take the verses which are just apparent verses, and they just started utilizing them wherever they want. Why? Because they do not have knowledge of the Quran. And you find this a lot, especially a Hafizul Quran. A Hafizul Quran, he'll know the words of the Quran, but he doesn't have a clue what the Quran is saying. Hafiz is one who has memorized the Quran. This is a great achievement. So he has memorized the words of the Quran, but if he's not an alim, he can't interpret the Quran. He doesn't know what the Quran is saying. He doesn't know what the meaning of the Quran is. So if a Hafiz Quran who memorized the Quran, or somebody else who has just memorized a few verses of the Quran, or may just know the Arabic of a few verses, he just knows the translation of the verses, and you just start utilizing it in your talks. You meet people also, you tell them, this is what the Quran says, and you just read the verse and just translate it. This is what leads to misleading people. A person who is not, that's why you find a person who is not a Hafiz, an Alim Deen, he doesn't even have the rights to be quoting from the Quran. Why? Because he doesn't know what he's doing, and if he interprets it incorrectly, this is tahrif fil Quran, and tahrif fil Quran is kufr. Tahrif fil Quran is where a person changes the meaning of the Quran, and this is tantamount to kufr. One of the signs of Qiyamah is that people will utilize the Quran, they'll give you proof from the Quran, they'll quote the verses of the Quran, but they'll be changing the meaning of the Quran, which is called tahrif fil Quran, changing the Quran, and this is kufr. In the same way, a person, let's we find today people just, as they want to, they just quote and narrate a hadith, whereas one of the principle of hadith is that you can only narrate hadith if you have been granted permission from another ustad. If your ustad who has taught you hadith, who has a direct chain to Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, if he gives the student the permission that he can now teach and narrate hadith, only he is allowed to narrate hadith. Today we just sit there, we open the kitab and we want to start reading the Arabic also, we will start translating it also. Who gives us the authority and the rights to do this? Which ustad told you and granted you the permission that yes, you understand the Arabic, you can read the Arabic. Today we can't read the Arabic and we want to read the Arabic, and then along with it we want to start giving various interpretations and commentary of the hadith. This is what leads to people being misguided, and this is exactly what the Nabi Kareem mentions, that close to Qiyamah this is what's going to happen, where people will start, who don't have authority will be given authority, and what will happen is they'll start playing around with deen. وَأَنزَلَ مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابِ الْحَقِّ لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ فِي مَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ. And so there's one Hafiz, as you know in the Quran, normally whenever it says Rabbana or Allahumma and Rabbana, we know that it's probably a dua, etc. in the Quran. So this one Hafiz, after his salat also was making various Rabbana, Rabbana, Rabbana duas also, and then at the same time he's making the Rabbana anzil alayna ma'idatan minas sama'. This was a verse which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed with regards to Banu Israel, that they made dua to Allah, that Rabbana anzil alayna ma'idatan minas sama', oh Allah, send food. And ma'idatan means a tablecloth, a dastaghan for us from the heavens. So Allah is narrating, this was the dua that Banu Israel were making, that oh Allah sent us a dastaghan from the heavens. So because he said Rabbana, he thought it's also one of the Rabbana duas. And then after his khatam of the Quran, he's also making the Rabbana atina fi dunya hasana, Rabbana this, Rabbana that, Rabbana anzil alayna ma'idatan minas sama'. He thinks he's making the dua, but he doesn't have a clue what he's saying and what's happening. This is the case. This is our case today's time. Why was the kitab revealed? Bil-haqqi, the kitab is revealed with the truth. لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ, in order to differentiate and distinguish بَيْنَ النَّاسِ, amongst the people, to judge between the people. فِي مَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِي, in those things which they dispute in. For example, all the things that the Banu Israel, the Jews, disputed in, the beliefs with regards Uzair alayhi salam, the beliefs of the Christians with regards Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, with regards various different injunctions, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down the book, fi makhtalafu fi, that these things in which you dispute, this is the true beliefs, this is the right teachings. وَمَا اخْتَلَفَ فِيهِ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ أُوتُوهُ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَتْهُ الْبَيِّنَاتُ بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala further says that no one disputed in it. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ, but those people, أُوتُوهُ مِنْ بَعْدِ, who were granted the book, مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَتْهُ الْبَيِّنَاتُ, after the clear signs were given to them. That those who disputed in it are the same very people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had granted the book. Those who were granted the book, who were granted the Torah, the Injil, they are the same ones who started disputing in it after مِن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَتُمْ بَيِّنَاتٍ, after the clear signs and the teachings were sent to them, they started interpreting. بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُمْ. Why? Because of the stubbornness amongst themselves. Because of the stubbornness led them to not understanding what the Quran says to them. فَهَدَى اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لِمَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الْحَقِّ بِإِذْنِهِ. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هَدَى اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. He guided those people who brought Iman, لِمَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ, in those matters in which they used to dispute مِنَ الْحَقِّ, with the truth. بِإِذْنِهِ, with His permission. Meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then, from those people who disputed, there were those who remained upon the disputation and they remained on falsehood. And there are those people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had guided them, who gave them guidance after they were misled. They were misled, but then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them hidayat min al-haqqi bi-idhnihi, from His permission. Which shows us that guidance is only from the permission of Allah. As He further says that وَاللَّهُ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ إِلَىٰ صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. That وَاللَّهُ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ, Allah is the one who guides مَنْ يَشَاءُ, whoever He wants, إِلَىٰ صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ, to the straight path. Which shows us that hidayat is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hidayat is not in the hands of any being, any person, and neither is hidayat in the hands of any Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The duty of the Nabi of Allah and the duty of the people is to give people, portray and teach the people the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then more than that, hidayat is only in the hands of Allah. It is only Allah that gives hidayat. So one should also realize from this is that if a person may have spoken to somebody, explained to somebody something, and that person started practicing, that person's eyes open, that a person shouldn't think to himself that this is due to me. That because I gave a talk and people started practicing it, or because I wrote something about it, people started practicing it, or because I went and spoke to this person, I mentioned this, that to him, I gave him this proof, I gave him that proof, so because of me he is now changed. No, it is only Allah that gives hidayat. وَاللَّهُ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. It is not you and I, but it is Allah, the one who gives hidayat. He gives hidayat مَنْ يَشَاءُ, to whoever He wants and whenever He wants. Our duty is that we should just propagate and teach the people. More than that, hidayat is in the hands of Allah. We should also ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide the people, and we should also make an effort in guiding the people. But more than that is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is only Allah who will guide a person, and he will only get the guidance when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants him to. Although in the process He might utilize us, but if He utilizes us, then this is merely out of His compassion towards us, out of His great compassion towards us, that He may utilize us and make us just a means wherein, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not directly now just going to bring light from the heavens and into his heart, Allah does not just come Himself and say, look, I am Allah, believe in me. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't do it directly in this manner, although He can do. So He might just utilize any individual. And if He does utilize any individual, it doesn't mean that that individual has some greatness or superiority in him. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala utilized him. Otherwise you find there are so many drunkards who became the means of certain people. Certain animals have become the means of people. Ibrahim bin Adham, he got his hidayat because of a lost camel. So hidayat comes through any means. It can be any incident that happens. It may be a disbeliever who might open a person's eyes. So a person shouldn't think that because I was the means of him, so I am something now. I am now something because of me. That person got this hidayat, he got that hidayat, he started practicing because of me. This doesn't mean anything at all. In the hadith is also mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even utilizes the fusaq, the fasiqs, the sinners for the sake of His deen. Sayyidina Umar Farooq radiallahu ta'ala mentions that he would fear greatly from this hadith, that whatever goodness he may be doing, he would wonder that what if I am also included into this category. That's why those people who do the work wherein they are teaching people what deen is, they should be very aware of this, that they shouldn't think that this is because of their own superiority or any greatness within themselves, Whereas it could be a case wherein we are also in that category where Allah is taking work from us because we are fasiqs. We can't say at all why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking work from us. But although we should always ask from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He should utilize us for the sake of His deen. We should be practicing upon deen until we die. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should utilize us as servants of His deen. And whoever He accepts, that it is nothing but His karam, His greatness. The poet says, Agar hum chahe to chahne ke qabil nahi. Agar hum chahe to chahne ke qabil nahi. Agar wo chahle to karam hai malik ka. If we want and if we choose ourselves, we are not worthy of being chosen at all. We are not worthy of putting ourselves forward at all. But if Allah chooses us, then it is merely out of His compassion towards us. It is nothing, no greatness in us itself. There is no anything of us being so unique, but it's just merely because out of the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has chosen us. And whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses just to be the means of guidance to any person, he should show his appreciation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that it is just Allah who is utilizing us as His tools. Now that we are worthy of it, it is He who puts the right words onto our tongues, the right thought into our minds, the right deeds in our actions. It is He who guides us in this manner. Otherwise we do not possess any of these things at all. All this is only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is something that we need to understand. And you'll find, dear friends, when a person, for example, we do the tafseer of the Quran, one may prepare beforehand. And when a person prepares, the only thing a person can prepare is looking at the wordings, the meanings, and why it was revealed, when it was revealed, and what circumstances in which it was revealed. More interpretation than that, one has to only rely on the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants. And then you find that when a person starts interpreting it, at the time it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who puts the right knowledge into a person's mind. Something which a person may not have even read beforehand, person may not have thought about beforehand, but it's just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who then puts it in a person's mind, and then it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who enables the car, the vehicle to move. That's why you find many times the verse that a lot of times we only do one verse or few verses, we don't do whole pages at all. And with the schedule that I have, I don't have the time to be looking up 10, 20 different tafseers of the Quran. There are so many tafseers of the Quran, there's no time for this at all. So what I normally do is I just open the Quran and just sit here just hoping. I just sit with hope. And at times when I start off, sometimes I look at the clock and I wonder, how's the time going to pass here? And before you know, without even realizing it, now you're pushing for time. So we just sit as beggars there in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that, Ya Allah, there's these hungry people here, now don't let me down. This is how I normally sit anyway. With nothing in my mind at all, just the guide is the Quran that is there. Hoping that because of these people who have travelled from wherever they have, with their thirst and that, Allah just put anything into the mind so that it helps those people. And you'll find also, it is very, very important what type of crowd a person has. Because you'll find, it is on the talab, the desire of the listeners, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts the things into the mind of the speaker. Because the speaker, one is wherein a person has to deliver a lecture, a talk on a specific topic which he's researched, he's prepared his talk, and he comes and he just delivers that. And one is where person can't prepare from beforehand, he doesn't know what else he's going to speak of, he doesn't have a specific topic, etc. That's when a person just sits and relies on the desire of the people. The more desire that the people have, you'll find accordingly that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts things into the mind of the speaker, and the speaker then just delivers things which just comes from top, it just comes into the mind and is then comes out from the tongue. Less of the time, you'll find there are times wherein I might go away later on and then I'll marvel with regards to something that I've mentioned. Because I couldn't marvel beforehand because I didn't read it or thought of it beforehand. Afterwards then a person marvels upon it, and that's when you know exactly that this is not my kamal, it's not anything of me, because I didn't know it from the start anyway. If I knew it from the start, it's different. Okay, I read it, I learned it beforehand. But if I hadn't at all, where has it come from? Then that you know for sure, it is only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala itself. Many times when Ustad teaches books, he might have learned something when he was studying, he learned something, but now when he comes to the seat where he's teaching his students the same books, now when he teaches the books of the alim books, the higher books, then you find whilst he's teaching, things just open up, various clauses, various interpretations, and in the same way various masail just start opening up, the doors just start opening up, where a person didn't even make mutalaa, he didn't make research of these things. There's certain things obviously a person may have made research beforehand, but then when it comes to it, nothing there at all. And there are also times wherein a person may have a fixed topic also, you go in mind that okay, these are a few points I'll talk about, and when you start to talk, you'll find all those points have gone one side, and you just start your talk, you end your talk, have you not even spoken anything at all about those points which a person had in mind. And you also have those people who might sit a few days continuously just rattling things up also. You even get those type of lecturers and those type of speakers who now just rely exactly on the memory of what, like the Hafiz al-Quran, of what he's learned, and then it's just a case of by memory rattling off. We should find that's a lot of times in student days, or maybe those speakers who are paid to go and deliver talks places, or those who make it in an occupation, you might find that in them. Otherwise, it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allahu yahdi man yasha, very very important, not just for ulama, but for each and every single individual. Because you'll find every individual does work of hidayat, works of deen. Either person does it all the time, some people do it sometimes, or somebody who doesn't do it at all. But there might be just occasion where he just starts conversing with somebody, and he might see somebody doing something wrong, or somebody doesn't know a Muslim, and then he might say, oh well, yeah, as far as I know, I think it's not permissible, you shouldn't be doing this. So his duty isn't of doing the work of deen, but just in conversation, he might just teach somebody one Muslim of deen, and then he tells a person, well, you shouldn't be doing this, you rather not do it, it's haram, etc. And that person now, he stops and he changes from it, he's heard it, so Allah gave him hidayat. He thinks, this person starts thinking, yeah, you know what I mean, mashallah, I'm the means of his hidayat, you know what I mean. And he goes on telling people, you know, this guy, this is how he used to be, this is how he was before. But then I mentioned to him, I told him, and I explained to him, and now he's changed, now look at him. So I told him this, I explained this to him, I showed him this, I that. And then he's now blowing here, whereas he doesn't realize that Wallahu yahdi man yasha. What you did, you just utilized. Allah Ta'ala just utilized you, that's all he did. But it is Allah who gives the actual hidayat itself. And when Allah gives hidayat, ila siratul mustaqim. We are such that if Allah guides us, then only we can guide him towards siratul mustaqim. If we are not guided, we are going to guide them we are going to actually guide them towards the wrong. That's what we find. If anybody is misled, how is misled? Mankind misleads people. It's mankind who mislead people. So those who are misled, mandalla, those who are misled themselves, who are dhalun themselves, they're not going to guide anybody else, they're just going to mislead other people. Only that person who is guided is going to guide another person, and that person can only have been guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is something that's very very important for us all, and especially da'is of deen, to remember, Wallahu yahdi man yasha ila siratim mustaqim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the tawfiq wa akhir da'wana.